What's up, everyone? Tony from the Cold Case Project, back again. And today, what I want to run with you over is all content shared in these videos is readily available in any Google search. Now, with that said, I take this content, have it rewritten, and upon rewriting it, put it in these videos to spread the word on the thousands and thousands of cold cases of men and women throughout the United States that are just forgotten, and I give this platform to them so their cases and their stories can be told. Now, in addition to that, if you look down below in the description, you're going to see some brand new t-shirt and coffee cup designs I've actually gotten from couple of my subscribers who have over the years have been giving me some awesome fan art. So with that said, I'm offering a 20% discount code down below if you check that out, and splitting proceeds with them because they are awesome. Been watching me for quite some time, and I definitely think they deserve to be rewarded for some of the work they do on top of being full-time employees also. So, once again, if you have any recommendations or any suggestions, comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the video. Like, subscribe. I'm out. Peace.
Welcome back to the Cold Case Project. I'm your host, Tony, and today we delve into a deeply unsettling case from the Phoenix suburb of Peoria, Arizona. The 1989 disappearance of Pam Page. This is a story marked by strange behaviors, conflicting testimonies, a forged letter, and a lingering sense of injustice that continues to resonate decades later. Pam Page was a housewife who shared ownership of a video store with her husband, Rob. By all accounts, despite the normal ebbs and flows of a long-term relationship, their life appeared content. In early July of 1989, Pam journeyed to Arkansas to visit her family, reassuring them that everything was well in her life. This seemingly ordinary trip will be the last time her family would speak with her directly. The first signs of something amiss surfaced on the evening of July 21st. According to Rob's initial account, Pam began acting strangely. This vague description sets the stage for a series of unusual events. Later that night, Rob awoke to find Pam missing from their bed. His search led him downstairs, where he discovered her on the couch, engrossed in family photographs and visibly upset, crying. Her explanation to Rob was a simple complaint of back pain, stating she would sleep on the couch for the night. The following morning, July 22nd, Rob's account continues with another peculiar observation. He found Pam downstairs again, this time sorting through her clothes. She reiterated that she wasn't feeling well, prompting Rob to offer to open their video store in her stead. This act of apparent consideration, however, would later be scrutinized under the weight of subsequent revelations. As Rob prepared to leave for the store, he claimed to have encountered a problem with his car's ignition switch. After allegedly fixing the issue, he proceeded to the video store and opened it for the day. 8 hours later, he returned home to find the house empty. On the scene was a note, purportedly written by Pam, stating she had left with another woman named Sarah. Rob's immediate reaction, as he described it, was one of embarrassment, the notion that his wife had left him for another woman. This embarrassment, he claimed, led him to the decision not to immediately inform Pam's family of her disappearance. This delay in communication would prove to be a significant point of contention and suspicion. 4 days later, the silence was broken by a phone call from Pam's sister, Trenna. Inquiring about Pam, Trenna was met with the shocking news from Rob that Pam was missing. Trenna promptly shared this information with other family members, who, in turn, contacted Rob. He read them the contents of Pam's alleged note, but a collective sense of unease settled among them. Something simply didn't feel right. Rob assured them that he had already filed a missing persons report with the police. However, when Pam's sister, Jimmy, followed up with law enforcement, she was met with a disturbing truth. No such report had ever been filed. Confronted with this discrepancy, Rob offered his version of the events of July 22nd to detectives. He stated he left home around 8 a.m., embarking on a fruitless search for a replacement ignition switch at several auto parts stores. His efforts were unsuccessful, and in the parking lot of one of these stores, his truck allegedly broke down entirely. He claimed to have called home, but received no answer, leading him to assume Pam had gone to the video store. Consequently, he called a taxi to take him back home. Adding another layer of strangeness, Rob claimed he never actually entered his house upon returning. Instead, he went directly to the garage, retrieved a part for his truck, and then, inexplicably, got on his bicycle to return to the video store. It wasn't until his truck was finally operational and he drove back home that he supposedly discovered Pam's note. According to this note, Pam had taken a substantial sum, $60,000, from the safe at the video store. Rob claimed he verified this upon returning to the store. The note also indicated that Pam had left her Corvette parked at a local donut shop. Rob stated he found a vehicle there the following day. However, law enforcement quickly identified significant flaws in Rob's timeline and claims. Employees at the last auto parts store he mentioned had no recollection of him or anyone inquiring about an ignition switch that day. Furthermore, despite Rob's assertion that his distinctive truck was parked there for 4 hours, none of the store employees remembered seeing it. Investigators also found it highly suspicious that Pam's Corvette was parked directly across the street from their home, a detail that contradicted Rob's claim that it took him an entire day to locate it at a donut shop. The only element of his initial story that was corroborated was the taxi ride from the vicinity of the auto parts store back towards his home. Focusing on the alleged farewell note, authorities launched an investigation into the mysterious Sarah. Despite their efforts, they were unable to identify any woman by that name who had a personal connection to Pam. Rob maintained he had never met Sarah, but claimed Pam had spoken of her, believing they had met through the video store. This lead, however, yielded no results. The most damning piece of evidence against Rob's initial narrative came with the examination of Pam's signature on the note. Experts determined that the signature was almost certainly not Pam's. Initially, Rob vehemently insisted that Pam had indeed signed it. However, under pressure, his story crumbled, and he confessed to forging Pam's signature himself. This admission marked a dramatic shift in his account of events. Rob then presented a completely different version of the events. He claimed that a week prior to Pam's disappearance, he had discovered the letter on their home computer. Confronting Pam about it, she allegedly dismissed it as something written in the heat of an argument, assuring him she had no intention of leaving. Regarding July 22nd, Rob now claimed he had gone to the video store that day and remained there until noon. Upon returning home, he stated he found the house in disarray. He alleged that all of Pam's clothing was missing, except for items set aside for donation. He further claimed that family photographs were gone, along with their beloved dachshund, Rerun. Strangely, Pam's credit cards and keys were on the kitchen table, but her driver's license was missing. Rob then admitted to adding 4 lines to the existing letter on the computer, printing it out, and signing Pam's name. He then drove her Corvette to the donut shop and called for a taxi. Rob's explanation for these fabrications was that he believed no one would accept that Pam had simply left him without these additional details. However, the sheer number of inconsistencies and the bizarre circumstances surrounding Pam's disappearance only intensified the authorities' suspicion towards him. When offered a polygraph test, Rob declined. Despite the overwhelming cloud of suspicion, Rob Page was never formally charged in his wife's disappearance. In a desperate search for answers, Pam's sister, Jimmy, consulted police psychic Carol Pate in Little Rock, Arkansas. Working solely from a photograph of Pam, Pate offered a chilling vision. She described seeing a man, strongly implied to be Rob, arguing with Pam, followed by a chase, and then a violent act of striking and suffocating her. Pate further claimed to have seen Rob being assisted by another woman, together placing Pam's body in the trunk of a car and driving away. Her vision included specific clues: the name Coolidge, the numbers 241, a gray factory located near a railroad track, and finally, the burial of Pam's body in a field near this factory. A reporter connected with Pam's family decided to investigate these cryptic clues. Remarkably, in Peoria, Arizona, the reporter discovered a gray factory situated near a railroad track. In the vicinity, the numbers 241 were found, along with a street named Coolidge. Despite these eerie correlations, authorities remained hesitant to rely on psychic information, and the question of Pam's fate, whether she was alive or dead, remained unanswered. Rob Page continued to maintain his belief that Pam was still alive, but the weight of the evidence and his own contradictory statements firmly placed him as a primary suspect in the eyes of law enforcement. The extra notes surrounding this case provide further context. The case was featured on a television program in 1993, during which Rob declined to be interviewed. It's important to note that this case is distinct from the 1991 murder of another woman named Kathy Page. Tragically, Pam's cousin, Darla Harper, also vanished from her home and was never found, though authorities do not believe the two cases are related. The official outcome of Pam Page's disappearance remains unresolved. Rob Page passed away from cancer in 2009, never facing charges in connection with his wife's disappearance. While some reports suggest he was cleared as a suspect, others indicate that law enforcement continued to consider him responsible. In a poignant and significant development in July 2017, nearly 28 years to the day of Pam's disappearance, her family received a formal letter from the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. This letter stated that based on new interviews and further investigation, if Robert Page were alive today, he would be charged with second-degree murder in the death of Pam Page. Due to his passing, the office considered the case closed. However, the closure offered by this legal determination does not bring Pam's remains home, and her family continues to yearn for that final piece of the puzzle. Adding to the tragedy, Pam's father passed away without ever knowing what truly happened to his daughter. The inconsistencies, the lies, and the enduring mystery leave a void that no official closure can truly fill. The question remains, what truly happened to Pam Page in the summer of 1989 in Peoria, Arizona? If you have any information, no matter how seemingly insignificant, about the disappearance of Pam Page, please contact the Peoria Police Department. Next, we journey to the stark and unforgiving landscape surrounding Death Valley National Monument, a place synonymous with mystery and unexplained disappearances. Our case centers on Roy Hegel, a traveling salesman from Fargo, North Dakota, who seemingly vanished in a thin air after a cryptic phone call from Arizona. Roy Hegel was last seen on February 26, 1989, at a bowling tournament in his hometown of Fargo. What happened immediately after the tournament remains shrouded in uncertainty, but somehow Roy embarked on a cross-country journey with no known purpose. The first tangible clue to his whereabouts emerged on March 8, 1989, when he called his ex-girlfriend. The location of the call was Kingman, Arizona, a significant distance from Fargo. During this conversation, Roy revealed a startling itinerary, 9 states in just 9 days. He also mentioned having only $200 remaining and expressed his intention to return home to Bismarck, North Dakota. Tragically, his ex-girlfriend noted a deep sense of depression in his voice, and he even hinted at feeling suicidal. Roy Hegel never made it to Bismarck, and no one has heard from him since. 2 days later, on March 10th, a chilling discovery was made. Roy's blue Ford Tempo was found abandoned in a desolate area off the road near the ominous expanse of Death Valley National Monument in California. His personal belongings were still inside the vehicle, a detail that often suggests the occupant did not intend to be gone for long. In a desperate attempt to find Roy, police followed a set of footprints leading away from his abandoned car. The trail stretched for an unsettling 6 miles into the harsh desert terrain before ultimately being lost. The question lingered, were these Roy's footprints? And if so, why would he walk alone into such a perilous environment? The mystery deepened as park rangers could never definitively prove that Roy had even been inside Death Valley National Park itself. The area surrounding the monument has a grim reputation for unexplained disappearances, with numerous tourists having vanished without a trace over the years, swallowed by the unforgiving landscape. Adding an eerie layer to Roy's disappearance was a strange parallel from his own past. Around the time of Roy's birth, his own father vanished without explanation, only to resurface alive and well several years later. This unsettling family history led some investigators to consider the possibility that Roy Hegel may have staged his own disappearance, intentionally walking away from his life, mirroring his father's enigmatic departure. Following his disappearance, there was a single, unconfirmed sighting of Roy in California. However, this lead never yielded any concrete evidence. Since that time, Roy Hegel has seemingly vanished completely. He has not used his social security number, accessed his financial accounts, nor has he been arrested anywhere in the United States. It's as if he ceased to exist. The Bismarck, North Dakota Police Department continues to carry the weight of Roy Hegel's unresolved case. Was he a victim of the harsh desert environment? Did he succumb to the despair hinted at in his last phone call? Or did he, like his father before him, orchestrate an escape from a life he no longer wanted? The vast and silent landscape surrounding Death Valley holds its secrets tight, and the ghost of Roy Hegel's departure lingers, a haunting reminder of the mysteries that can swallow a person whole. If you have any information, no matter how seemingly insignificant, regarding the disappearance of Roy Hegel, please contact the Bismarck Police Department. Perhaps someone remembers seeing his blue Ford Tempo in the vicinity of Death Valley in early March of 1989, or perhaps a detail from his life in Fargo holds a crucial clue. Our next story takes us to the dry heat of Tempe, Arizona, where we delve into a mystery that has haunted the state for over 20 years, the disappearance and presumed murder of Cookie Jacobson. A mother of 2 adopted children, Cookie vanished on September 21st, 1998, and despite disturbing clues, her case remains active, with police still seeking answers. Cookie Jacobson was 49 years old at the time of her disappearance. Born on September 19th, 1949, she was described as a 5'4" woman weighing around 145 pounds, with light brown hair and hazel eyes. Distinctive features included pierced ears and a surgical scar on her knee. On the night she was last seen, she was likely wearing a knee-length denim blue nightgown, her gold wedding band, and a necklace with a Hebrew love symbol pendant. Authorities have DNA and dental records on file for Cookie, ready for identification should she ever be found. Cookie was last seen inside her residence near McClintock Drive and Southern Avenue in Tempe, Arizona. What makes this case particularly unsettling is the alleged involvement of her 2 adopted children. While the disappearance may not be widely known outside of Arizona due to the pre-social media era and differences in investigative techniques at the time, it reportedly left a lasting impact on the local community and law enforcement. Cookie was reported missing the day after she vanished, on September 22, 1998. A significant search effort was launched, fueled by the fact that all of Cookie's personal belongings remained in her home, seemingly ruling out a voluntary departure or a home invasion where she was taken against her will. When her husband and children returned home on that fateful day, Cookie was simply gone. A week passed with no sign of the 49-year-old homemaker. Hundreds of volunteers, including her adopted daughter Lauren, plastered missing person flyers across Tempe. However, during this search, detectives began to notice a disturbing anomaly. Cookie's adopted son, Aaron, then 16 years old, was conspicuously absent from the search efforts. His 13-year-old sister, Lauren, was actively participating, which would later raise further questions given the subsequent revelations. Reporters covering the disappearance also noted Aaron's lack of involvement, finding it unusual that he seemed unwilling to aid in the search for his mother. While acknowledging that individuals cope with trauma differently, Aaron's behavior began to raise red flags for the authorities. This unusual behavior put Aaron on the police radar. Why would a 16-year-old seemingly distance himself from the search for his missing mother? Initial accounts suggested a normal family life. Cookie and her husband had adopted 4 children as babies, raising them as their own, with no indication that the children ever felt any different. However, a darker undercurrent began to emerge. A pivotal moment came when a grocery store clerk reportedly overheard Aaron expressing a desire to kill his mother. This statement, though unconfirmed, understandably drew the attention of investigators. Before directly confronting the children, police administered polygraph tests to the family. The father reportedly passed with flying colors. Lauren's results were inconclusive. Aaron, however, failed the polygraph miserably. While acknowledging the limitations and admissibility of polygraph results in court, Aaron's failure was a significant indicator for investigators. Confronted with these results, Aaron reportedly broke down during interrogation and confessed to a shocking series of events. According to the detective's account, Aaron stated that he woke up late for school on the morning of his mother's disappearance. Upon entering her bedroom, he claimed to have found Cookie dead in bed. He then allegedly told his younger sister, Lauren, that he needed her help to wrap their mother's body in a yellow sheet and dispose of it in a trash can located in the alley. He stated that Lauren complied with this disturbing request. This revelation casts a dark shadow over Lauren's participation in the initial search efforts. At just 13 years old, she was allegedly involved in concealing her mother's death. Following Aaron's confession, the investigation shifted from a missing person case to a homicide investigation. Investigators subsequently found blood in the Jacobson's trash can located in the alley, and forensic testing confirmed it to be Cookie Jacobson's blood. This provided a significant piece of evidence, though it didn't reveal the cause of her death. Despite Aaron's confession to disposing of the body and the presence of Cookie's blood in the trash can, the lack of a body and a determined cause of death presented a significant hurdle for prosecution, especially given the legal standards of the time. While Arizona has seen murder convictions without a body, the circumstances of this case at that time made it difficult to proceed. Interviews with fellow students and acquaintances revealed that, prior to Cookie's disappearance, Aaron had allegedly mentioned wanting to kill his mother on more than one occasion. Another student claimed Aaron indicated his sister also wanted to harm their mother. The motive behind these alleged desires remains unclear, as there were no prior reports of child abuse or neglect within the family. The investigation led authorities and numerous volunteers to a landfill, where an extensive and arduous search was conducted over several weeks. Despite sifting through thousands of tons of trash, including mail positively linked to the Jacobsons' neighborhood around the time of Cookie's disappearance, her body was never found. Cookie's brother reportedly visits the landfill area annually, holding on to a sense that his sister's remains are there. Tragically, years have passed, and the absence of Cookie's body remains a critical missing piece of evidence, hindering any possibility of bringing anyone to justice. While the adopted children, now adults in their 30s, reportedly maintain their innocence regarding her death, claiming they disposed of her body out of fear of being accused, their actions raise profound questions. The lack of a body also leaves open the possibility, however unlikely given the circumstances, that Cookie died of natural causes or an accidental overdose. Though without an autopsy, this can never be confirmed. The alleged statements from Aaron about wanting his mother dead, however, cast a long shadow over any such theories. The husband was reportedly cleared as a suspect, though his emotional state during the ordeal was described as somewhat unusual, understandable given the extraordinary circumstances. If you have any information, no matter how seemingly insignificant, about the disappearance of Cookie Jacobson, please contact the Tempe Police Department. Even after so many years, the truth deserves to be uncovered, and Cookie Jacobson deserves to be found. Next, we journey to Lake Havasu City, Arizona, to unravel the strange and unsettling disappearance of John Iverson in January of 1991. This case is a bizarre blend of alleged kidnapping, a secret rapid-fire weapon, a girlfriend with a failed lie detector test, and a missing inventor known for his outlandish stories. John Iverson resided in the 1700 block of South Palo Verde in Lake Havasu City. His living situation was unconventional. He shared his home with Kathy Monroe, who was not only his current girlfriend, but also his former wife. Their relationship history was equally peculiar. They had married in 1987, only to divorce shortly thereafter, reportedly for financial reasons. Following the divorce, Iverson transferred all of his assets into Monroe's name. On the evening of January 4th, 1991, an outsider entered this complicated domestic scene. Jack Weber, a machinist from Las Vegas. Weber had a professional relationship with Iverson, supplying him with parts for his cabinet-making business. According to Kathy Monroe's account, Weber arrived at their home around 5 p.m. to deliver a completed project. She stated that their usual meeting place was Iverson's shop across town, but Weber had gone there to find Iverson absent. While waiting for Iverson to arrive, Monroe, who also acted as Iverson's bookkeeper, wrote Weber a check for $1,000 as payment for his work, despite being unable to locate the corresponding invoice. Iverson finally arrived home, and Monroe informed him about the check she had given to Weber. Shortly after this exchange, Monroe claimed she fell asleep. When she later awoke, both men were gone. She then went back to sleep. Around 9:30 p.m., she was awakened again, this time by a flashlight beam moving down the hallway towards her bedroom. Standing in her doorway was Jack Weber, wearing gloves and holding a pistol. He told her he had Iverson tied up in his van and demanded money. In fear, Monroe gave Weber $4,000 in cash. Weber then pressed her for more, asking about the amount of money Iverson had in the bank and demanding she write him a check. Under duress, Monroe drafted a check for $2,500, deliberately making errors as she wrote it, a subtle signal that she was being coerced. Weber then followed her down the hallway towards the kitchen. In a moment of opportunity, Monroe managed to escape. She ducked into the family room, locked the door behind her, and fled the house through another exit. She ran screaming down the driveway, past Weber's van, and sought refuge at a neighbor's home, where she called the police. When authorities arrived at the scene, Weber, his van, and John Iverson were all gone. Iverson's motor home remained parked in his driveway. Inside, investigators noted a damaged table and a small spot of blood on the carpet. This spot appeared to have been cleaned with a household cleaner and was partially concealed by a rug. However, the origin and freshness of the bloodstain remained inconclusive. The initial search for Jack Weber proved unsuccessful. However, Weber did write a letter to his wife, providing her with the location of his van, a silver 1985 Ford. He suggested she return it to the bank to alleviate further payments. The postmark on this crucial letter was unfortunately illegible, hindering the determination of Weber's immediate whereabouts after the alleged kidnapping. Acting on the information contained in Weber's letter, investigators located his van in a parking lot within an industrial area, approximately 10 miles from his Las Vegas home. A thorough examination of the vehicle revealed no signs of a struggle or any indications of violence, such as bloodstains. Nearly 4 months after John Iverson vanished, Jack Weber finally turned himself into authorities on April 23rd. He faced serious charges of kidnapping and armed robbery. However, Weber's version of the events of January 4th painted a drastically different picture, one where he claimed he had been deliberately set up by both Kathy Monroe and John Iverson. According to Weber, Iverson had approached him with a proposition to help build a novel type of firearm, a rapid-fire weapon that didn't require live ammunition. Weber agreed to this collaboration, but stipulated that he be paid in full upon delivery, as Iverson had a history of falling behind on payments for previous work. Weber stated he arrived at Iverson's residence at 5 p.m., an hour later than Monroe's initial claim, expecting to receive $8,400 to cover both current and outstanding payments. He noted that Monroe appeared nervous after writing the $1,000 check, and he informed her that the amount was insufficient. Weber claimed that Iverson arrived home around 6:30 p.m., after which Monroe went to her bedroom without saying a word. While Iverson and Weber were engaged in conversation in the kitchen, Iverson reportedly received a phone call, which he indicated was from someone inquiring about the specialized gun. Weber had a prototype of the weapon with him, but refused to leave it with Iverson without receiving payment. The two men then walked to Weber's van at the bottom of the driveway. Once inside, they swiveled the front seats to examine the gun, which was located in the back seat. Iverson then informed Weber that he had a potential buyer for the gun and offered to pay him $2,500 up front, with the remaining balance to be paid within a week after he had the opportunity to showcase the weapon. Weber agreed to this arrangement and left Iverson in the van with the prototype, returning inside to collect the initial payment. Inside the house, Monroe asked Weber to return the $1,000 check she had previously written, stating it would help cover the $2,500 she was about to give him. Weber complied, and Monroe wrote a new check. When she requested a receipt, Weber suggested using the $1,000 invoice he had left on the kitchen table, which was marked paid, and simply altering the amount. As they began to walk towards the kitchen, Weber realized Monroe was no longer behind him. Turning around and heading back towards the office area, he suddenly heard her screaming from the driveway. Weber went outside to the van to inquire with Iverson about the commotion. Iverson reportedly claimed he didn't know what was happening and suggested they simply leave, assuming Monroe would eventually calm down. Iverson then retrieved a box from his garage and asked Weber to drive him to Bullhead City, Arizona, a town approximately 65 miles north of Lake Havasu City. En route to Bullhead City, Iverson asked Weber to stop so he could make a phone call, supposedly to Monroe. He told Weber that the police had been to their house, but Monroe had explained it as a misunderstanding and sent them away. Iverson also mentioned that he and Monroe were experiencing problems and that he had instructed her to call Weber's wife to inform her that Weber would not be home that night. Weber and Iverson spent the night in Weber's van, planning to test fire the prototype gun the following morning. They conducted the test in the desert, firing ball bearings, all of which they diligently retrieved afterward. While the gun required further refinement, it did function. Later that day, Weber contacted his wife, who informed him that the FBI was looking for him, believing he had kidnapped Iverson. Weber assured his wife that Iverson was with him and unharmed, explicitly stating he had not kidnapped him. He then relayed this information to Iverson. Iverson subsequently made a phone call and then told Weber that Monroe had informed him the police had returned to their home and issued the kidnapping warrant after she was unable to confirm Iverson's whereabouts. Weber expressed his desire to return to Lake Havasu City to clarify the situation, but Iverson vehemently refused, stating he might face legal repercussions for violating parole and wanted to consult with an attorney first. He promised to contact a lawyer he knew in Phoenix, leading Weber and Iverson to spend another night in Weber's van. The following day, Weber stood beside Iverson and listened as he made the call to the attorney. Iverson arranged a meeting for the following Friday, 5 days away. They then hid the prototype gun and its blueprints near Laughlin, Arizona, and drove to Phoenix. In Phoenix, the two men parted ways, agreeing to meet again on Friday morning. Weber drove back to Las Vegas, went home briefly to pack some clothes, and then lived out of his van across town for the next several days. On Thursday night, he returned to Phoenix, but Iverson never appeared at their agreed-upon meeting place on Friday morning. When Weber checked the hiding spot in Laughlin, the gun and the blueprints were gone. It was at this point that Weber realized he believed he had been set up. He went into hiding, hoping that the police would eventually locate Iverson and understand his innocence in the alleged kidnapping. During this time, he made 3 trips to California to visit his adult daughter, who was tragically dying of cancer, and later to attend her cremation. The remainder of his time was spent hiding at his home in Las Vegas. It was ultimately at his wife's urging that he finally decided to turn himself into the police. Because John Iverson remained missing, the police had no concrete evidence against Jack Weber other than Kathy Monroe's statement. Adding another layer of complexity to the case, Monroe failed a lie detector test concerning the events of January 4th. She attributed this failure to a reaction to psychoactive drugs she was taking at the time, including Prozac an antidepressant, and Valium, a muscle relaxant sometimes prescribed for anxiety. Investigators requested that Monroe take a second polygraph test. However, she refused to be tested again by the same examiner and instead hired her own. She subsequently passed this second test, but police discounted these results as unreliable due to the circumstances. In June of 1991, due to the lack of corroborating evidence and the questions surrounding Monroe's testimony, the case against Jack Weber was dropped. However, authorities made it clear that he could face charges again if further evidence were to surface. Within 2 months of John Iverson's disappearance, Kathy Monroe liquidated her assets and moved to California, raising further suspicion among various members of Iverson's family regarding her account of his alleged kidnapping. While Monroe maintained that she and Iverson had a good relationship, other witnesses suggested underlying tensions. They reportedly had a significant argument in the summer of 1990, and Iverson confided in his brother that he was considering leaving her. Additionally, Iverson was reportedly facing scrutiny from the IRS for back taxes and was undergoing a business audit, potentially providing motives for a calculated disappearance. John Iverson was known as a brilliant inventor and electronics expert. His company, Electron Kinetics, produced some of the most highly regarded audio amplification systems of its time. However, he was also described as having a difficult and unpredictable temperament and struggled with heavy drinking. Friends and family readily admitted that Iverson frequently embellished stories about himself and his accomplishments. For instance, he falsely claimed to have been a student at the prestigious Massachusetts Institute of Technology, even stating he was expelled before graduation, despite never having attended the university. Iverson also propagated the narrative that the FBI and other government agencies had stolen some of his inventions, adding to the aura of eccentricity and potential instability surrounding him. The prevailing theory among many is that John Iverson orchestrated his own kidnapping and deliberately vanished to escape the mounting pressures and problems in his life. However, the precise circumstances of his disappearance remain shrouded in mystery, and the possibility of foul play cannot be entirely dismissed. Since January of 1991, John Iverson has never been seen or heard from again, leaving behind a perplexing cold case filled with more questions than answers. The disappearance of Gary Hose remains a deeply troubling and unsolved case, marked by allegations of abuse and a family's desperate search for answers. Gary was last seen in Phoenix, Arizona, on April 30th, 1974, and has not been heard from since. At the time, he and his twin brother, Jerry Lee Hose, were both kindergarten students at Campo Bello School. Years later, in the 1990s, Jerry Lee Hose came forward with a disturbing claim. He alleged that their mother had killed Gary in 1974. However, these statements have never been verified, and their accuracy remains uncertain. The case gained renewed attention in November 2015 when Gary Hose's older brother, Guy, took drastic action. Believing that crucial clues lay buried on the property in Maricopa, Arizona, where the family had resided in 1974, Guy brought a backhoe to the site. He began digging, attempting to uncover evidence related to his brother's disappearance. However, his efforts were quickly halted by the county sheriff's department, who cited him for trespassing. Following Guy's actions, authorities conducted their own searches. They carried out excavations on the Maricopa property and also at the backyard of a former residence of Gary's mother in North Phoenix. Despite these efforts, the searches yielded no significant findings. Nevertheless, Gary's family maintains their belief that the key to understanding his disappearance lies within the Maricopa property. The renewed media attention surrounding these digs prompted a former babysitter to come forward. She revealed that she had not been aware of Gary's disappearance until that time. Her account painted a disturbing picture of the environment in which Gary and his siblings had lived. The babysitter described witnessing instances of severe abuse and neglect. She stated that Gary was subjected to beatings, and that when she cared for the host children, their mother instructed her to lock Gary and Jerry alone in their room, without access to food or water. Deeply concerned, the babysitter shared these observations with her own mother, who then contacted the police. However, despite this intervention, the children were not removed from the home. Guy Hose corroborated these accounts, confirming that he and his siblings, particularly the twins, endured abuse at the hands of both of their parents. He recounted a specific incident when he was 8 years old and the family moved away from the house where Gary disappeared. Upon inquiring about his brother's whereabouts, his parents told him to never mention Gary's name again. Gary's mother has not been publicly identified or named as an official suspect in his disappearance. The case remains unsolved. The morning of November 10th, 1995, dawned with a deceptive sense of normalcy in Phoenix, Arizona. Rhonda Mitchie, like many working mothers, prepared for her day, unaware that her 13-year-old son, Bradley Hansen, wouldn't be attending school. It was Veterans Day, a fact Bradley knew, but his mother didn't. He had a different plan, a plan hatched with his friend and classmate, Jeremy Bach, also 13. They would seize the unexpected day off, a secret adventure hidden from their parents. Bradley, a typical teenager with the world stretching out before him, borrowed a neighbor's mountain bike, a symbol of youthful freedom, and pedaled towards Jeremy's house in Ahwatukee Custom Estates, located in the 3200 block of East Piro Street. Another classmate, a 12-year-old girl named Taylor, was also scheduled to join them later in the afternoon, promising a day of teenage camaraderie. Jeremy's stepfather, Daniel Bach, saw the two boys in his kitchen that morning, the image of them seemingly on their way to school, a comforting illusion. He left for work around 7 a.m., believing the boys would soon follow the routine of their school day. Rhonda Mitchie, at her workplace, had a nagging feeling. Around 8 a.m., the realization struck her. It was Veterans Day. A wave of unease washed over her. She began paging Bradley, the primitive technology of the time, a lifeline to her son. The pager remained silent. As her workday progressed, the silence grew heavier, amplifying her anxiety. By the time she returned home around 2 p.m., Bradley was still absent. The house, usually filled with the echoes of his teenage life, was eerily quiet. Rhonda's initial unease transformed into a full-blown panic. She started calling neighbors, Bradley's friends, anyone who might have seen him. The day, meant for remembrance and reflection, was quickly becoming a parent's worst nightmare. She called the Bach home, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke to Jeremy. He told her Bradley had been there earlier, but had left. Rhonda, her maternal instincts screaming, told Jeremy that if Bradley wasn't home by 5 p.m., she would call the police. Her next call was to Daniel Bach, Jeremy's stepfather. She relayed her growing fear, explaining that Bradley had not had permission to be out all day. Daniel, seemingly unconcerned, stated he would talk to Jeremy when he got home and then call her back. That call never came. Unable to bear the waiting, Rhonda embarked on a desperate search. She drove to the homes of Bradley's friends, her heart pounding with each passing minute, each unanswered door, each shake of the head. She even drove to the Bach residence, though the details of that encounter remain frustratingly vague in the official reports. The afternoon stretched into evening, the setting sun casting long, ominous shadows, mirroring the growing darkness in Rhonda's heart. She returned home, clinging to a fragile hope that Bradley would be there, waiting, safe. He wasn't. Shortly after 5 p.m., with the weight of her worst fears pressing down on her, Rhonda Mitchie called the Phoenix Police Department and reported her son missing. The initial response, a classification of runaway, added insult to injury, a bureaucratic dismissal of a mother's terror. That night, Rhonda didn't sleep. The weekend that followed was a blur of frantic activity. She continued her search, talking to neighbors, classmates, desperate for any clue, any sign that her son was alive and well. A disturbing rumor began to surface, a whisper that grew louder with each conversation. A gun had been fired at the Bach home on the day Bradley disappeared. On Monday, November 13th, the rumor became too persistent to ignore. Rhonda, Her voice hoarse with exhaustion and fear, called Daniel Bach again. She recounted what she had heard, the chilling tale of a gun discharged, a near miss, a bullet lodged in a wall. She told Daniel that she'd heard Brad had fired the gun, nearly hitting Jeremy. Daniel, his voice firm, denied it. He insisted the guns were safely secured, that none were missing. He contacted his girlfriend, Debbie, who confirmed his account. Shortly after this, Jeremy called Rhonda, a call seemingly arranged by Debbie, to explain what had happened. He offered a simple explanation. Bradley had left the house, wearing his backpack, riding off on his bike. Rhonda, her mind racing, asked the crucial questions. Who was the last person to see Bradley? What was his state of mind? Jeremy replied that Brad had said his life sucked at school. The following Monday, a school administrator, Mrs. Schelling, met with Jeremy, hoping to glean any information that might help locate Bradley. The truth, however, was far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. Mrs. Schelling later testified that the sequence of events that day was a confusing jumble of conversations and revelations. She learned that Taylor had also been at Jeremy's house that day. Confronted with this information, Jeremy's carefully constructed story began to unravel. Jeremy told Mrs. Schelling that Brad had come over, left, and said he'd be back in 10 minutes, but never returned. Mrs. Schelling, armed with the rumors of gunshot, pulled Taylor aside and asked her directly what had happened. Taylor's account shattered the fragile web of lies. She confirmed that Brad's borrowed bike was in the driveway when she arrived. Inside, only Jeremy was there. She asked about Brad, and Jeremy told her he had left. She didn't believe him, suspecting a childish prank, but a search of the house yielded nothing. Jeremy then offered a different story. He and Brad had fought over a video game. Jeremy claimed he had called Taylor a name, which angered Brad, leading to a physical altercation before Brad left. But Taylor's observations were far more damning. She had seen bloody clothes in the washer and a hole in Jeremy's shirt, a hole with blood on it. She had also noticed a blood spot in the kitchen. When she pointed these out, Jeremy's explanation was chillingly inadequate. He claimed Brad had hit him with a bar stool, causing the blood. Taylor also saw a hole in the kitchen wall, which Jeremy attributed to Brad firing a gun at him, a shot that had missed and struck the wall. Mrs. Schelling, deeply disturbed, confronted Jeremy again about the gun. He denied it, insisting it was just a rumor. She then contacted Daniel Bach, relaying the student's reports and the existence of the bullet hole. Daniel, steadfast in his denial, maintained there was no gunplay and no bullet hole. The days turned into weeks. November bled into December. There was no sign of Brad, no phone calls, no word from the police. The initial classification of runaway felt like a cruel joke. Those who knew Brad knew he wouldn't simply disappear. He was a 13-year-old boy, not equipped to survive on his own. He would have needed help, someone to shelter him, to hide him. The idea that he had just vanished seemed impossible. During a language arts class, as the teacher discussed Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, Jeremy asked a haunting question. How long would it take a person who had been shot to bleed to death? The question, casual yet macabre, sent a shiver through the classroom, a foreshadowing of the darkness that lay hidden beneath the surface. On December 5th, the Phoenix police decided to interview Jeremy again, a formal interrogation, this time with a growing suspicion. Officer Lee Sandro, along with Mrs. Schelling, met with Jeremy at the middle school. Officer Lee Sandro, initially, was simply gathering information, still operating under the assumption that Brad was a runaway. Jeremy repeated his story, the one about the fight and the butter knife, the 10-minute departure, and the never-returning friend. He dismissed the gun rumor, claiming he had made it up. He suggested Brad might have run off to Tucson with a friend named Popey or to California to be with his father. Officer Lee Sandro documented Jeremy's statements, the inconsistencies and the evasiveness, little red flags that hinted at a deeper, darker truth. The police, their instincts tingling, reached out to Daniel Bach, who again confirmed that the .357 revolver was still in its hiding place under the couch cushion, unfired. He reiterated that there had been no shooting, no bullet hole. The following day, December 14th, detectives arranged to interview Jeremy at his home, with Daniel present. The detectives, their questions probing, focused on the rumored gunshot. Jeremy, under his stepfather's watchful eye, repeated his denial. But then, the detectives noticed something, a strange spot on the kitchen wall, a patch that looked freshly applied. Daniel produced a .357 Magnum, claiming he had smelled it and confirmed it hadn't been fired. The detectives, their unease growing, pressed on. The next day, December 15th, Daniel Bach called Detective Lewis, requesting a meeting at the police station. The carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Daniel revealed that after the detectives had left the previous day, he and Jeremy had talked. Jeremy had confessed. A gun had gone off, striking the kitchen wall. Daniel even had the slug, the leaden evidence of the lie. He brought it to Detective Lewis and arranged for a second interview with Jeremy at the Bach residence. That day, Detectives Dillian and Lewis returned to the Bach home. This time, Jeremy's story shifted again. He admitted that a gun had been fired, but claimed it was an accident. He and Brad had been playing with the guns, he said. He claimed that Brad had fired first, the bullet whizzing past him, lodging in the kitchen wall. The detectives, their skepticism growing with each new version of the truth, asked Jeremy to demonstrate what had happened. As Jeremy positioned himself against the wall, a glaring discrepancy became apparent. The bullet hole was far too low to align with Jeremy's shoulder, as his story suggested. Jeremy, caught in a lie, seemed to slide down, try to align his shoulder with the hole, his explanation faltering. The detectives asked Jeremy if the hole they had seen the night before was the same hole from which he had dug the slug. Jeremy confirmed that it was. The pieces of the puzzle, dark and disturbing, began to fall into place. During a break in the questioning, as Detective Dillian sat alone with Jeremy, the 13-year-old leaned over and uttered a chilling question. "You guys really think I did him, don't you?" Detective Dillian, his voice steady, replied that they were concerned because Jeremy had lied repeatedly, making it impossible to know what to believe. Jeremy's response was equally unsettling. "If I shot him, it would ruin my entire life forever." The detectives, their suspicions solidified, knew they were dealing with more than a runaway. They left the Bach home that day, the weight of a hidden crime heavy on their shoulders. On January 9th, 1996, the Phoenix police, acting on a hunch, seized the Bach family's trash bin. The hunch proved tragically correct. Detective Dillian, opening the lid, was met with the overwhelming stench of decomposition. A dark brown substance lined the bottom of the can, and what appeared to be blood stained the outside. The blood evidence was sent for analysis, compared to a sample from Rhonda Mitchie. The results confirmed the worst. It was Bradley's blood. The forensic evidence, the silent witness to a violent act, was undeniable. The wheels of justice began to turn. On February 15th, 1996, Detective Lewis and Dillian discovered that Jeremy no longer resided in Phoenix. He and his mother had moved to Las Vegas. The reasons for this sudden move remain unclear, a detail lost in the fog of the investigation. The Las Vegas Police Department was contacted, and they served Jeremy with a physical evidence order, obtaining blood and other forensic samples. The pieces of the puzzle, scattered across state lines, were finally coming together. February 16th, 1996, was a day of coordinated action. In Phoenix, the police serve a warrant on the Bach home, meticulously searching the residence. They recovered the loaded .357 Magnum, the alleged murder weapon, and pieces of the kitchen wall and tile grout, evidence from the patch hole tailor and the officers had noticed months before. A further search yielded a magazine and holster for a .38 semi-automatic pistol. In Las Vegas, on the same day, Jeremy's mother called the police, directing them to Detective Hatch. She stated that Jeremy wanted to talk about what had happened to Brad. Detective Hatch met with Jeremy and his mother at their residence and transported them to the station for a formal, recorded interview. In that interview, Jeremy's story, after months of lies and half-truths, finally began to unravel. He admitted that Brad had come over that morning as planned. He admitted they had been playing with Mr. Bach's guns. He admitted that, while handling the loaded guns, something had bumped his hand, causing him to accidentally pull the trigger. He admitted that Brad had been killed. He described the aftermath, the frantic cleanup, the desperate decision to put Brad's body in the family trash bin, the digging of the slug from the wall. Udania an argumen, anyintin. That evening, Jeremy called a friend in Phoenix, Erica Steele, and confessed that he was in trouble with the police over the whole Brad thing. He told her he would be charged with accidental murder, repeating the same story about playing with guns and a tragic accident. On February 17th, Jeremy was extradited to Phoenix, where he was interviewed again by Detective Lewis. This interview, also recorded, was played for the jury during the trial. Jeremy's story, initially consistent, began to shift again, revealing the calculated nature of his actions. This time, he claimed that he and Brad had been pointing the guns at each other, pulling the triggers, believing they were empty. He said that as he went to reload the .357 Magnum, intending to put it away, the gun was low, near his hip, the barrel pointing down. He claimed something bumped his hand as he was reloading, causing him to accidentally pull the trigger. He insisted the gun was not cocked, that he didn't even know how to cock it. He said his hand was resting on the trigger guard, not the trigger. Then came the chilling details of Brad's final moments. Jeremy said the bullet struck Brad in the chest, sending him backward into the wall. The bullet, he said, ripped through Brad's small frame, lodging in the kitchen wall. Brad fell to the floor, on his side, his eyes open, his chest heaving, foam coming from his mouth. Jeremy, in a moment of grotesque detail, claimed he thought he saw little chunks of his heart falling from Brad's chest as it heaved. Jeremy said he initially thought Brad was joking. Then the horrific reality dawned on him. Oh, I killed him. He tried to sit Brad up, but Brad kept falling back, speechless. Finally, Jeremy leaned Brad against the kitchen wall, lifted his shirt, and wiped away the blood on Brad's stomach with a rag. He then turned on some music and began cleaning up the scene, gathering the spent shell casing and the cigarettes they had been smoking, throwing them in the trash. He considered calling his stepfather, but decided it would be too stressful. He considered calling a friend with a truck to help him bury Brad, but realized that friend would then know he had killed Brad and would tell the police. He never considered calling for help, for medical assistance that might have saved Brad's life. Brad lay dying in the kitchen for an hour and a half while Jeremy, a 13-year-old boy, made calculated decisions about how to dispose of the evidence, how to protect himself. Eventually, Brad rolled over, his eyes closed, no longer breathing. Jeremy, his mind racing, picked up Brad's body and placed him in the trash bin. He claimed he almost folded him in, leaving his legs sticking up, the lid open, just in case Brad wanted to get up and walk away. An hour later, Jeremy checked the trash bin. Brad hadn't walked away. He closed the lid. He then spent the next 2 hours cleaning the scene, scrubbing the blood from the wall and the grout, washing his clothes, making a mental note to throw Brad's backpack in the trash. Taylor arrived shortly after Jeremy finished cleaning, explaining why Brad's bike was still in the driveway and his backpack on the kitchen table. Jeremy even mentioned that it was trash day the following Tuesday, and he had forgotten to take the bin to the curb, leaving Brad's body in the family trash bin for an entire week before it was collected. The Phoenix police charged Jeremy with Brad's murder. The prosecution sought second-degree murder charges, and Jeremy was tried as an adult, the first person under 18 in Arizona to face such a trial. The decision to pursue the second-degree charge was driven by several factors, but two stood out to the jurors and the prosecution. The testimony of a weapons expert, who stated that the trigger pull required a deliberate squeeze, not a simple bump, and Jeremy's extensive efforts to conceal the crime and his callous disregard for Brad's life. The prosecutor argued that while they couldn't definitively say whether Brad would have survived if Jeremy had sought immediate medical attention, his actions demonstrated a shocking lack of concern for his friend and a chilling descent into self-preservation. Jeremy had lied repeatedly, his stories changing with each telling, while Brad's family searched in vain, clinging to the hope of finding him safe. Bradley's parents also sued Jeremy's parents for improper storage of the handgun and the possibility of helping Jeremy dispose of the body. The outcome of that case remains somewhat unclear, another loose end in this tragic tale. Jeremy was sentenced to 22 years in an Arizona prison in January 1998, with a release date set for December 1st, 2021. The Phoenix police spent nearly $100,000 on the 2-month landfill search, a testament to the lengths they went to in their attempt to recover Brad's remains. To this day, Bradley Hansen's body has never been found. The Arizona desert, vast and unforgiving, holds many secrets. Among them is the mystery of Roland Heimbrook and his grandson, Richard Gorum, who vanished from Avra Valley in the summer of 1986. Roland Heimbrook, a man whose life was intertwined with his family, shared a home in the 17700 block of Chinley Place in Marana, Arizona, with his grandson, Richard Gorum. Their lives, though perhaps facing challenges, seemed to have a familiar rhythm. But that rhythm was abruptly silenced on the evening of July 7th, 1986. The days that followed were filled with an unsettling quiet. Roland, who was known to keep his daughter informed of his whereabouts, had fallen silent. This deviation from his usual behavior raised alarm. It wasn't until July 12th, 5 days after they were last seen, that a friend of Heimbrook's, sensing that something was deeply wrong, reported them missing. The initial shock of their disappearance was compounded by a disturbing detail. Both Roland and Richard had left behind all their clothes. This suggested that they hadn't planned a trip, a detail that deepened the mystery and fueled the growing fear that something sinister had occurred. The search for Roland and Richard stretched across the arid landscape. Then, on September 27th, a chilling discovery was made. Roland's vehicle, a white 1966 Chevrolet El Camino pickup truck, was found abandoned in the desolate expanse near Silver Bell, south of Tucson, Arizona. The truck, baking under the relentless desert sun, had been there for approximately 2 months, a silent testament to the vanished lives of its owner and passenger. The discovery of the abandoned vehicle deepened the mystery. There was no sign of Roland or Richard anywhere near the truck. The harsh environment offered no clues, no footprints, no indication of where they might have gone. The vastness of the desert seemed to have swallowed them whole. As the investigation unfolded, a disturbing picture of the family dynamics began to emerge. Richard was living with his grandfather because he had run away from his mother's home. This detail hinted at underlying tensions and a troubled family situation. Suspicion began to coalesce around Richard's mother's live-in boyfriend. He was identified as a possible suspect in the disappearance. Reports indicated that he had been involved in several confrontations with Roland Heimbrook. Even more troubling were allegations of abuse directed towards Richard, his sister, and his mother. This backdrop of violence and conflict painted a grim picture, suggesting a motive for foul play. Despite the suspicions and the passage of time, the trail went cold. No trace of Roland Heimbrook or Richard Gorum has ever been found. The years have turned into decades, and their cases remain unsolved, a haunting reminder of the mysteries that lie buried beneath the Arizona sun. The desert keeps its secrets, and the fate of Roland and Richard remains a tragic and unanswered question. James Hendrickson's disappearance is a deeply troubling case that remains unsolved. The events leading up to his vanishing and the subsequent investigation are filled with unanswered questions and lingering suspicions. On the night of June 11th, 1991, James spent the night at the residence of his babysitter's cousin. His mother and sister were out of town, and James had opted to stay with a babysitter rather than accompany them. The babysitter arranged for James to stay overnight at her cousin's house, where a 4-year-old nephew was also present. The following morning, James told those at the house that he was going to walk home. A witness reported seeing James walking in the vicinity of Oracle Road and Grant Road in Tucson, Arizona. This sighting represents the last confirmed time James was seen. It's possible that James stopped at either a 7-Eleven or a Circle K convenience store in that area before attempting to make his way back to his own home. At the time of his disappearance, James was living in the 200 block of East Delano Street in Tucson. He was preparing to enter the 6th grade at Amphi Middle School in the fall of 1991. James was not known to run away from home. However, he was described as streetwise, which initially led law enforcement to consider the possibility that he had left on his own accord. Adding a disturbing layer to the case, the 4-year-old who had been with James before he disappeared provided a chilling account. The young boy told police that he knew where James was, claiming that 2 bad men had entered the house, wrapped James in a blanket, and taken him to Mexico. He led investigators to the Santa Cruz River, near a local sports park, identifying that location as Mexico. A thorough search of the Santa Cruz River area yielded no evidence to support the boy's account. Investigators also focused their attention on the babysitter's cousin, at whose house James had spent the night. The cousin had a criminal history, which included allegations of sexual deviancy. He was questioned extensively and underwent a polygraph examination, which he failed. However, despite these red flags, he has never been charged in connection with James's disappearance. James's father resided in Michigan and had not been in contact with his son for several years prior to 1991. His mother initially left Arizona after James's disappearance, but she has since returned and continues to cooperate with law enforcement in the ongoing investigation. Over time, the initial theory that James had run away has been largely discounted. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance, the conflicting accounts, and the passage of time have led investigators to suspect that foul play was involved. The case remains open. The vanishing of Devon Williams remains one of the most perplexing and unsettling cases in the annals of unsolved mysteries. It's a narrative woven with bizarre occurrences, frustrated investigators, and a family left to grapple with an enduring and agonizing uncertainty. The events unfolded in the rugged landscape of Arizona's Tonto National Forest, a place of stark beauty and hidden secrets. It was Memorial Day weekend, specifically Sunday, May 28, 1995. The forest, usually a haven for outdoor enthusiasts seeking respite from the mundane, became the stage for a series of inexplicable events. Among those present were Lynn Yarrington and her husband, Jack, who were camping in the area. Their peaceful retreat was abruptly interrupted by the jarring spectacle of a massive semi-truck, a 48-foot, 10-ton behemoth, violently intruding upon the tranquility of the woods. These were not roads designed for such vehicles. They were narrow, winding paths better suited to the nimbleness of four-wheel drive vehicles. The truck's behavior was as strange as its presence. It was seen careening back and forth, as if the driver were lost, disoriented, or engaged in some desperate maneuver. 2 other campers had a harrowing experience, nearly being run over by the truck as it hurtled towards them. They were compelled to reverse frantically, their hearts pounding in their chests, until they could escape its path. The driver, they later recounted, seemed utterly detached, his face an impassive mask, offering no indication that he even acknowledged their existence. There was no attempt to slow down, no gesture of apology, no sign of recognition, only a relentless, unwavering drive. Later that same day, a group of picnickers encountered the truck, now stationary, mired in a field, its enormous wheels deeply embedded in the soft earth. One of the picnickers, a man named Charles Hall, approached the driver, seeking an explanation for this incongruous scene. The driver's words, however, were far from illuminating. He uttered a cryptic phrase, "They made me do it," a statement that immediately raised more questions than it answered. When Charles pressed him for clarification, the driver descended into further incoherence, muttering to himself, "No, you can't help me out. I'll never get out of here. I'm going to jail." These words, laden with a sense of paranoia and despair, led Charles Hall to speculate that he might be witnessing a hostage situation, a hijacking, or some other form of coercion. He wondered if the driver was being held at gunpoint within the cab of the truck. Yet, the driver made no attempt to solicit help, to signal distress, or to detain the picnickers. His behavior was a perplexing contradiction. a mixture of fear and resignation that defied easy interpretation. The authorities were eventually alerted to this bizarre scene. Deputy Dean Wells responded to the report of a stranded truck. His initial reaction one of disbelief that such a vehicle could even navigate those roads. His astonishment only deepened when he arrived at the location. The truck was indeed there, mired in the mud of a meadow near Forest Service Road 137, in the vicinity of Buck Springs, approximately 20 miles from Highway 87. The truck's cargo, a substantial load of 1,200 boxes of lettuce and strawberries, was completely intact and undisturbed, the refrigeration unit still running, a testament to the perishable nature of its contents. The cab of the truck was locked, and the driver was nowhere to be found. Deputy Wells initiated an investigation, but his efforts only served to amplify the mystery. A check of the National Crime Information Center database revealed no reports of a missing truck or driver. The scene itself yielded no evidence of foul play. The interior of the truck's cab was meticulously clean, devoid of any signs of a struggle or any personal belongings that might offer a clue to the driver's identity or his sudden disappearance. The deputy was confronted with an inexplicable void, a truck without a driver, a crime without a victim, and a series of events that defied any rational explanation. The following day, at approximately 4 p.m., the enigma deepened. Lynn and Jack Yarrington, the same couple who had witnessed the truck's earlier erratic movements, encountered the driver once again. This time, he was on foot, in an even more disoriented and disturbing state. He was partially kneeling on the ground, his gaze fixed on a tree, his mouth moving, emitting a series of unintelligible sounds, a low, guttural mumbling that made no sense. When Jack attempted to offer assistance, the man's response was a non sequitur, a bizarre and disconnected statement. "I got to light the grill." The situation grew even more surreal. The man was clutching a $20 bill in his hand, striking it repeatedly with a rock, as if attempting to ignite it. Before him was a flat rock, but there was no grill, no food, no fuel, no indication of any intention to start fire. The Yarringtons, increasingly alarmed and bewildered by this strange behavior, decided to leave. As they drove away, the man threw an object at their vehicle, a final act of unsettling aggression that underscored the erratic and unpredictable nature of his condition. This encounter marked the last confirmed sighting of the man. It was on this same day that a long-distance truck driver named Devon Williams was reported missing. He was 29 years old, a married man, and a father of 3 children. He was employed by Flint Hill Transportation Company, based in Emporia, Kansas. Those who knew Devon described him as a responsible and reliable individual, a dedicated family man who was not prone to abandoning his responsibilities or engaging in reckless behavior. The eyewitness account from the Tonto National Forest, however, bore a chilling resemblance to Devon Williams. The disoriented man seen driving the truck and later wandering in the woods strongly matched his description, providing a potential, yet deeply unsettling, connection. Devon Williams had embarked on what was supposed to be a routine trucking assignment. On May 23, 1995, he departed from his home in Americus, Kansas, heading west on a route he had traveled many times before. He successfully delivered his cargo in California and picked up a new load for the return trip. He maintained regular contact with his employer, Tom Wilson, who reported that everything seemed normal, the trip progressing smoothly and according to schedule. On Saturday evening, May 27th, Devon checked in with headquarters from Kingman, Arizona. During this final communication, he mentioned that he was experiencing difficulty sleeping but was determined to continue his journey. He was expected to arrive in Kansas City, Missouri, on Monday morning. But by Sunday morning, Devon Williams had seemingly vanished, along with his truck, into the vast and unforgiving wilderness of the Tonto National Forest. The reasons behind his deviation from his planned route, his bizarre behavior, and his ultimate disappearance remained shrouded in mystery. His wife, Mary Lou, was convinced that some terrible event had occurred. She insisted that it was completely out of character for him to abandon his route or to act in such an irrational manner. The disoriented and incoherent state attributed to Devon by the eyewitnesses raised concerns about the possibility of drug use. However, this theory was vehemently rejected by those who knew him best. His employer, Tom Wilson, stated that Devon had consistently passed all drug tests, both random and scheduled, and that there had never been any indication of drug-related issues. Detective Bruce Cornish, the lead investigator assigned to the case, found himself confronted with a perplexing absence of any discernible motive or explanation. In most missing persons cases, investigators can often identify contributing factors that might shed light on the individual's disappearance, such as a history of criminal activity, drug abuse, mental health problems, financial difficulties, or troubled relationships. However, Devon Williams exhibited none of these characteristics. "I don't know what was wrong with him that weekend," Detective Cornish admitted, acknowledging the unique and baffling nature of the case. He noted the possibility that Devon might have chosen to abandon his responsibilities and start a new life, but this theory was difficult to reconcile with his established character and his seemingly happy and stable home life. The fact that Devon's briefcase, ice chest, and sleeping bag were left behind in the truck, while his duffel bag and favorite cassette tapes were missing, added another layer of complexity to the investigation. If he had indeed decided to run away, why would he leave behind essential items while taking seemingly less important personal belongings? This selective packing suggested a hasty and unplanned departure, rather than a deliberate and calculated decision to disappear. Mary Lou Williams, Devon's wife, steadfastly refused to believe that her husband had willingly abandoned his family. She described their marriage as being in a period of great happiness and stability. They had recently purchased a new house and were making plans for their future together. The idea that Devon would walk away from all of that, without any explanation or warning, seemed utterly inconceivable to her. Further bolstering this perspective was the account of a woman who frequently assisted Devon with load pickups in California. She recalled him as a dedicated and reliable professional, whose only moments of irritation stemmed from delays in loading, which prevented him from returning home to his family as quickly as he desired. This image of a responsible and committed family man stood in stark contrast to the erratic and disoriented figure described by the eyewitnesses in the Tonto National Forest. If Devon Williams did not run away, then the question remains, what happened to him? Extensive searches of the Tonto National Forest were conducted, involving foot patrols, canine units, and off-road vehicles. These searches, however, yielded no results. Hunters and hikers who frequented the area were also questioned, but none of them had encountered any trace of Devon Williams or his belongings. The lack of any physical evidence, any indication of his fate, led to a growing sense of frustration and despair among investigators and his family. The sheer impossibility of explaining his disappearance led some to speculate about more unconventional theories, including the possibility of abduction by UFO, a suggestion born out of the sheer lack of any rational explanation. Deputy Dean Wells, a seasoned investigator with years of experience in the area, expressed his bewilderment. "I have conducted many searches," he stated, "and I have never had an instance where I conducted a search and not found the person, either dead or alive." This statement underscored the truly exceptional nature of the case, a mystery that defied all conventional investigative techniques and defied all logical expectations. As time passed, the hope of finding Devon Williams alive began to dwindle. Back in Kansas, his wife, Mary Lou, clung to a fragile and increasingly tenuous hope. She faced the agonizing task of explaining her husband's absence to their children, who would often ask if their father was ever coming home. Her only solace, a heartbreaking and uncertain answer, was to tell them that she did not know, and that if he was not coming home, he was probably up with God. Nearly 2 years after Devon Williams vanished, in May 1997, hikers stumbled upon a grim discovery that would add another layer of complexity to this already baffling case. In a remote area of the Tonto National Forest, not far from where he was last seen, they found a human skull. Dental records later confirmed that the skull belonged to Devon Williams. The discovery of Devon's remains, while providing a degree of closure for his family, only deepened the mystery surrounding his death. The skull offered no clues as to the cause of death, and no other remains were found in the vicinity. The question of how Devon, a seemingly stable and responsible man, came to be in such a state of disorientation and distress, and ultimately how he died, remained unanswered. Theories abounded, but none could be definitively proven. Medical emergency. One theory posited that Devon may have suffered a sudden and debilitating medical event, such as a stroke, a severe diabetic episode, or a brain aneurysm. This could explain his erratic behavior and his inability to seek help. However, there was no medical history to suggest he was predisposed to such conditions. Mental health crisis. Another theory explored the possibility of an acute mental health crisis. Undiagnosed schizophrenia or a severe psychotic episode could have led to his disoriented state and his wandering in the forest. However, those who knew Devon saw no signs of any underlying mental health issues. Substance use. The possibility of drug use, though strongly denied by his family and employer, could not be entirely ruled out. Certain substances could induce the kind of paranoia and confusion that Devon exhibited. However, the lack of any evidence of drug paraphernalia in the truck and the fact that Devon had passed drug tests made this theory less plausible. Environmental factors. Exposure to the harsh elements of the Tonto National Forest, such as extreme heat, dehydration, or hypothermia, could have contributed to his disorientation and death. However, it was unclear why he would have left his truck and wandered off in such a state. Foul play. Although there was no evidence of a crime, the possibility of foul play could not be completely dismissed. Perhaps Devon encountered someone in the forest who harmed him, though the lack of any motive or evidence made this seem unlikely. The case of Devon Williams remains a haunting mystery. It is a story of a man who seemingly vanished without a trace, leaving behind a bewildered family, a frustrated team of investigators, and a community grappling with the inexplicable. The discovery of his skull only added to the mystery, providing a tragic end to the search, but no answers to the crucial questions of why and how. The Tonto National Forest, with its vastness and its secrets, holds the key to this mystery. Whether the truth lies in a medical event, a mental health crisis, an unfortunate encounter, or some other unknown factor, it remains elusive. We will now delve into the deeply personal and still unresolved disappearance of Emily Heber, who vanished from Yuma, Arizona, on February 3, 2013. We'll hear from her mother, Jenny Jimenez, as she shares the story of her daughter and the decade-long search for answers. Emily Heber was just 19 years old when she was last seen. Her mother, Jenny, remembers her as an independent and funny child, a natural swimmer who even surpassed Jenny's own high school records in the butterfly. Emily had a close circle of friends and a vibrant personality that brought laughter to those around her. However, as Emily entered her senior year of high school, Jenny noticed a shift. Things began to go missing from their home, and Emily's behavior changed. Tragically, Emily became involved with drug use, leading to her stealing from family members. Jenny believes that Emily's desire to be liked and accepted may have contributed to her falling in with the wrong crowd. By the time of her disappearance, Emily had been living on the streets for about a year, moving between different groups of people. Despite this, she maintained contact with her family. However, about 2 weeks before February 3, 2013, the contact abruptly stopped, which was uncharacteristic of Emily. When Jenny initially tried to file a missing persons report with the Yuma Police Department, she was told that due to Emily's age and lifestyle, they couldn't file it at that time. The family took it upon themselves to put up flyers and conduct their own search. Thankfully, a detective eventually took on Emily's case after the discovery of another young woman in the area. Emily was last seen by her grandmother, Jenny's mother. She had her dog with her, a black and brown miniature pinscher named Bruiser, who also vanished and has never been found. The circumstances surrounding Emily leaving her mother's house were difficult. Jenny had taken away Emily's car due to ongoing issues at home. On the day she left, someone picked her up down the street, someone Jenny vaguely remembers as looking like a parent of a friend. It appeared Emily had planned to be gone for a while, as she took her birth certificate and savings bonds with her. Adding another layer of concern, Emily's ex-boyfriend had been released from jail around the same time she disappeared. He was interviewed by the police and a private investigator hired by the family, Dave McDowell. Dave has been actively working on Emily's case for 8 years, even after the Yuma Police Department designated it a cold case just 2 years after she went missing. In a significant development, a few weeks after Emily was last seen by family, she was captured on surveillance footage at a Walmart in Yuma. She was with a group of people involved in what authorities described as a shoplifting incident. These individuals were reportedly identified and contacted, but by that time, Emily had moved on to another social circle. Her mother described Emily's life at that time as transient, moving from one group of friends to another. Yuma's proximity to the Mexican border, about 20 minutes away, raises the possibility that Emily may have crossed into Mexico. One theory investigated was that she might have been involved in drug trafficking across the border. While there were no concrete records of her frequent border crossings, the ease of doing so in the area couldn't be discounted. The family has cooperated with both local and Mexican authorities, and there were even reported sightings of Emily in Mexico that prompted family members to travel there. Unfortunately, those sightings did not turn out to be Emily, though they did lead to the discovery of another missing person, a small glimmer of hope amidst the ongoing tragedy. Jenny expressed frustration with the sporadic communication from the Yuma Police Department, wishing for more regular updates. While authorities have been forthcoming to a degree, there are limitations on the information shared, especially if it pertains to ongoing investigative leads. The police have not yet stated whether they suspect foul play in Emily's disappearance. The family hired private investigator Dave McDowell, who has had more access to the case files. Jenny expressed her shock at learning about a property search conducted by the police that she was never informed about beforehand. Despite the challenges, the unwavering support of Dave McDowell has been invaluable to the family. Even in retirement, he continues to work on Emily's case. Adding to the heartbreak, Emily's sister had recently had a baby before Emily's disappearance. Emily was excited to be an aunt and was present at the hospital when her nephew was born, suggesting a desire for connection and a future with her family. This makes her prolonged absence even more perplexing and less likely to be a simple case of running away. Emily is described as being 5 feet 6 inches tall, weighing around 150 pounds, with brown hair and green eyes. Her distinctive appearance should make her recognizable. There is a $50,000 reward for information leading directly to Emily. While many people have come forward with information, their primary motivation has been to help, not to claim the reward. Unfortunately, the family has also been subjected to numerous scams. Jenny has participated in a few interviews and podcasts, hoping to reach someone who may have information about Emily. She expressed her willingness to share Emily's story on any platform, believing that even one person coming forward could be the key to finding her daughter. Years have passed since Emily Heber was last seen. Her family continues to endure the agonizing uncertainty of her disappearance. The complexities of her life at the time, her involvement with different groups, and the proximity to the border create a challenging investigative landscape. Yet, the hope of finding Emily remains alive. If you have any information regarding the whereabouts of Emily Heber, please contact the Yuma Police Department at 928-373-4678. You can also call 78 Crime to remain anonymous. Emily's family deserves answers.